Ah, garlic, otherwise known as the stinky rose. Not long ago, garlic consumption in the United States was so rare that most garlic was actually sold in small cardboard boxes. I kid you not. And yet, the consumption of garlic has more than tripled since the 1990s, with over 2.5 million acres of garlic under cultivation. So, what is the story of this bodacious bulb, and how in the world did it become attached to the legend of vampires? That is what we are going to check out. Ted here. One of the most potent members of the onion family, garlic is one of the oldest vegetables known to man. It was first cultivated during the Neolithic period, and by 3000 BC, it had made its way from Central Asia all the way to North Africa. A matter of fact, the Egyptians loved garlic. They loved it so much that they left samples of garlic in the pharaoh's tombs. As a matter of fact, one of only 2 recorded slave revolts in ancient Egypt occurred because of a failure of the garlic harvest. That's because the slaves' wages were paid in garlic. Garlic was money. During the time that the Israelites were in Egypt, they too developed a love for the herb, with scripture mentioning that as the Israelis set off on their exodus from Egypt, garlic was one of the things they missed most. This fact, oddly, factored into the rise of anti-Semitism during the years of the plague in Europe. But more on that later. In fact, ancient Chinese, Greek, and Indian doctors prescribed garlic as a cure for impotence, and many a man tried to sneak garlic into his date's food, believing it to be an aphrodisiac. But what about its tie to vampires? Now that is a story you can sink your teeth into. 2 people groups in Eastern Europe widely adopted garlic in their cooking. These 2 groups were the Romas, or Gypsies, and the Jews. Then came the plague. One of the symptoms of the Black Death was the radical swelling of the glands under one's arms and in the groin area. These were called buboes, hence bubonic plague. As dehydration struck with the disease, these buboes would typically crack in 2 areas, looking very much like a bite, much like the cracks in this apple look like after I've held it for a brief moment under a hairdryer. This gave rise to the notion that it was the advent of biting monsters that spread the plague. Vampires. The virus which caused the plague was spread by the bite of fleas, which served as the vector for the disease, but these bites were too small to see. Garlic, though, is a natural repellent for fleas. Now, the Gypsies and the Jews had been suspect by much of the population in Europe before the plague, as they spoke strange languages and had no real country of their own. But with the plague, everyone was looking for a scapegoat. Since the Jews and Gypsies incorporated large amounts of garlic in their diets, they did not succumb to the plague in nearly the numbers that the rest of the population did, because the garlic kept away the fleas. Thus, the superstitious peoples of the Dark Ages blamed them for the plague, calling them the vampires, which increased persecution of the Gypsies and significantly increased anti-Semitism in Europe. And because then the Roma and Jewish settlements smelled of garlic since it was used in their cooking, the belief came about that garlic would actually ward off vampires. Back to garlic's connection with romance though. My wife has had a rough couple of days at work, so tonight I'm gonna make a nice romantic Italian style pasta dinner. The recipe calls for 1 clove of garlic. I think I might use 2 or 3 instead. I hope that this has been fun and informative. For more fun recipes, travel tips, and videos, check out our website at historybytheplate.com. Oh, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. It is fun and free. Happy cooking!